Hey, croeso, welcome to the Social Sciences Masterclass. My name is Dr. Sean Jones, and we also have...
Hi, my name is Dr. Charlotte Brookfield.
And we're both based in the School of Social Sciences in Cardiff University. And in this sort of masterclass, we're going to give you a bit of a taster of the research we've carried out within the social sciences. So we're going to talk about research we carried out as part of our PhDs. So that's why we're both doctors now. We became doctors because we sort of asked, we carried out research for our PhD and we were examined on it. And just to sort of explain, so PhDs, so what we both did was we both studied within the School of Social Sciences, Cardiff University, so we did our undergraduates here. And then we did a master's course then, and then we went along then to do a PhD, and both of our PhDs were funded as well, and you can get funding to do your PhD. So we're part of the furniture really in the School of Social Sciences. So I'll move on to the next slide.
Yes, so as Sean said, we're going to tell you a little bit about the research that we both did a few years ago now for our PhD projects, and broadly we're both interested in researching and investigating topics that are related to education or fall in the field of education. However, we've both used different approaches when we've gone about this. So I've used in my research what we call quantitative methods, so methods that allow us to collect numerical data to analyse and undertake statistical tests to explore relationships between possible variables or possible demographic groups and things like that. Whereas Sean's opted to use a more qualitative approach where the resultant data is either perhaps textual or in some instances visual, to understand sort of the feelings, attitudes, aspirations in Sean's case of young people. So while we're kind of very loosely looking at similar issues and often engaging with educational theorists and literature that is similar and perhaps even crosses over, how we've done that is slightly different, and we're hoping that at the end of this masterclass we've kind of given you a little bit of an insight into the different approaches that can be used. Okay, so we're going to start by talking about my research. So I've called this "What does it add up to? The place of number in the social sciences." And my research has really looked at the different methods that have been used in the social sciences to undertake research. And I've been really interested in this presentation just to talk to you about what's being used in British sociology. So I have done a little bit of research looking at the discipline in other countries, so looking at New Zealand and also looking at the Netherlands, and I've also done some research looking at other social science disciplines. But for these slides, I'm just going to talk about sociology in the UK. And for my PhD research, I sent out a survey to higher education institutions or universities where they had sociology departments, and people were either teaching sociology or they explicitly stated in their short bio on their website that their research fell within the area of sociology. And I asked them about the methods that they used when they were doing their research. And as you can see from this first infographic, all the people in yellow there represent the people that said they use quantitative approaches, so use those numerical approaches that I just mentioned. And that was about 10% of my respondents. And I should say this was about 400 people that replied to this survey. So about 10% using quantitative methods. And then in terms of qualitative methods, we can see that actually it was almost 60% of the survey sample said that they used qualitative methods in their sociological research. And then about the last sort of third, so about 30%, were saying that they used a mixture of both quantitative and qualitative methods in their research. So even if we combine those that use some quantitative methods, if they're a mixed methods researcher, with those that said they just use quantitative methods, the proportion is still smaller than that using qualitative methods. And we'd kind of expect to anticipate that that split should be more 50-50, but we can see here that doesn't seem to be the case. And looking on this second sort of infographic that I've got on the slide here, we can see that these were the different approaches that the survey participants reported using. And those methods that appear larger or in larger text are those that were reported with the greatest frequency, while those that are appearing much smaller were the ones that were used with less frequency. And again, I think this kind of is very clear straight away that it was the qualitative approaches that seemed to be used with the most predominance among the survey sample. So you might say, so what? What does this have to do with anything? How does it relate to education and why is it important? Well, I think, first of all, there were concerns surrounding the impact that social research can have on sort of things like policy and practice if we do not engage with a variety of different methods and different approaches. If we've got little or no quantifiable data, it's really hard to engage sometimes with policymakers to actually encourage change to happen. But also, without engaging with quantitative methods, what we actually end up seeing is that potentially we are ghettoising ourselves from other disciplines. So we can't necessarily engage with perhaps geographers or with economists because we're not speaking almost the same language if we're not using these techniques. But perhaps even more of a shame is that we're potentially narrowing our possibility to engage with academics in other countries as well, which again stops that possibility for comparative research, which could be really interesting and really insightful. But I think the other concerns that have kind of come out of this are really more important and probably of more interest to me, which is about actually this potential narrowing of the curriculum that our students are receiving. So because we don't have researchers that are potentially well-versed or confident with quantitative methods and don't use them in their own research, does that mean that we are now delivering to students a shrinking curriculum where they don't see the importance of these methods or the relevance of them to their studies, or they don't even know how to use them in some instances and apply them to their own problems or social interests? And on the next slide, I have got a quote that kind of encapsulates this. So this actually came from one of my survey participants when I was asking them about their views on British sociology and to sort of talk about their own research in this survey. There was open text boxes, so although it was predominantly quantitative data, I did get some quotes, and this is one that I think encapsulates kind of what I just tried to say about why this is potentially an important problem to explore in more depth. So when I give my judgment on British sociological research, I take into account, 1, the poor visibility of the discipline and hence its attractiveness for future potential bright students. 2, the poor link that exists between policymakers and sociologists, not systematic, but rather sporadic. 3, the poor training on methods and theory and the reduced chances for interdisciplinary research. Young sociologists are often not able to cooperate with other disciplines which are more likely to attract funding. So here, this researcher who responded to my survey has really taken what I just said to you and nicely summarised it in a quote that actually this methods teaching is really important to enhance the visibility of the discipline and therefore its attractiveness to young people, which we always want to encourage to come and study the social sciences. But also it's perhaps weakening that relationship between policymakers and sociologists, and meaning that other people in other disciplines that potentially have the quantitative skills but not the sociological insights are actually getting to inform policymakers over sociologists with these potentially really valuable insights. And then, as I said, this perhaps really worrying implication that the training that the students are receiving is actually reducing their opportunities to see what quantitative methods can do and the questions that they can help us answer, and our opportunities therefore to engage with other disciplines and to attract funding. So on the next slide then, I'm just going to tell you about what I'm doing now. So as Sean said at the start, this is based on our PhD research. So it was a couple of years ago, and I'm going to bring you up to date a little bit. So fast forward slightly. And as I said, for me, the most interesting part about all of this is thinking about the students. It's going back to the core value of the education and how we train students in quantitative methods. So what we're looking at now is I'm actually doing a content analysis of students' dissertation projects. So students often opt to do a dissertation in their final year. It's an extended piece of writing exploring a research problem that they are particularly interested in. And we have been doing a content analysis to look at the different topics that students are studying as for their dissertation and the methods that they are using. And we're trying to see if we can find any relationships or associations between perhaps the training that students have had in quantitative and qualitative methods, the topics they've chosen, even their gender as well is quite interesting, and the methods that they've chosen. So there's some really interesting things emerging from there. The other thing we're doing is we're actually conducting online surveys with our students this year, our dissertation students, to find out how they came about choosing which methods to use for their dissertation this year. So what factors influenced their decision making there? Was it attainment in previous assessments? Was it perhaps discussions with staff members? Was it looking at existing research in the mainstream journals, and so on and so forth? So we're hoping to kind of bring the findings of those two studies together and really be able to talk about the student experience of using number in the social sciences.
Thank you very much for that, Charlotte. So I'm going to talk now a bit about research that I carried out for my PhD a couple of years ago. So I was interested in young people's aspirations, so what they wanted to do in the future, and focusing specifically on young people's educational and career aspirations. So I was interested in finding out whether young people wanted to go to university or not, and what sort of subjects they wanted to study in the future. What I did was I focused on students who were in year 11, so the final year of compulsory education. So whether they wanted to go into sort of college or sixth form, so that sort of stuff, but also career aspirations. So what sort of jobs do they want in the future? Similar to this sort of child on the left here, whether they wanted to become a teacher or a doctor or an accountant. And what I did was I focused on students, year 11 students from the South Wales Valleys. So the South Wales Valleys is an area that has sort of undergone sort of significant social and economic changes over the past few decades. So I was interested in finding out what impact have these changes had on young people's aspirations. And as Charlotte mentioned at the start of slides, my research was more qualitative. So what I did was I carried out sort of semi-structured interviews with the students. So I interviewed them, and then what I collected then was qualitative data. So it was very textual words, very sort of rich data in depth, and then analysed these interviews thematically. So sort of read the interviews and tried to identify any themes that came out from the interviews. And when we're thinking about sort of aspirations, but sort of other stuff as well, such as the choices that people make, people's attitudes. One of the debates surrounding sort of aspirations or choices or attitudes is whether these things are influenced by individual agency. So whether as individuals make our own choices, sort of form our own aspirations or our own attitudes, or whether are our aspirations, are they sort of influenced by social structure? So are they influenced by our family or other institutions such as schools or our community or friends? And so that's one of the things that my research looked at, was whether these young people's aspirations, whether they were influenced by individual agency or social structure. And what I'm going to show you now is I'm going to show you a quote from one of the interviews I carried out. So this was an interview with a student called Joe. Now I've anonymized, so that's not their real name. But Joe here, so Joe said that they wanted to go to university and looking for work after sixth form. So they had long-term aspirations to go into university. And so I asked Joe, well, what is your reason for wanting to go to university rather than looking for work after sixth form? And Joe says, well, my mum left school very early. And so throughout life, she said that, if she could go back, she would change that decision of leaving school very, very early, because she would have had more of a better education. And that's the thing. I don't want to. I want to go far. Yes, I want to go very far in my life. So that's why. So if we analyse, if we look at this sort of interview extract, we could argue that this interview extract provides support to social scientists to believe that aspirations are formed by individual agency. So we can see that for Jo, she wants to go to university. She wants to go far. She wants to go far in life. And so that's one of the reasons why she wants to go to university. But at the same time as well, we could argue as well that sort of social structures also influence Jo's aspirations. She talks about her mother and talks about her regret that she left school very early in her life. And so we can see that her mother's sort of educational trajectory or a trajectory in life had an impact on Jo's sort of aspirations. So I think the point I'm trying to make here is that sometimes it's quite difficult for us to distinguish whether it's individual agency or social structure that has an impact on our aspirations. Okay, so what I've got now in the end, if you want to find out a bit more and if you want to read a bit more about our research, here are sort of links to Charlotte's research and my research as well, our PhD research. So if you want to read a bit more about them, they're available online for free. If you Google those titles, you'll find them. They're quite a long read, aren't they, Charlotte?
Yeah.
So you might want to skim read them. Mine's over 80,000 words, but you might find them quite interesting if you want to have a read of them as well. So I think that's it from us. So yeah, thank you very much for sort of watching the video. There isn't anything else that you want to add, Charlotte?
No, just thank you very much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it.
Enw i yw Gweno a fi'n astudio Human, Social and Political Sciences yma yng Nghaergrawnt yng Ngholeg Pembroke a fi ar fi'n cyrraedd diwedd fy nhymor cyntaf yma. Es i ysgol uwchradd gyfun Gymraeg lle nes i astudio lefel A hanes, Cymraeg, daearyddiaeth a wedyn nes i wneud AS Ffrangeg a hefyd nes i gymryd y BAC hefyd. Fi'n astudio fel rhan o fy nghwrs i cyfuniad y bynciau. Fi'n wneud gwleidyddiaeth, international relations, social anthropology a cymdeithaseg, sef sociology. So fi'n astudio'r 4 pwnc yna am y flwyddyn gyntaf, a wedyn ar ôl hynny mae penderfyniad y fi wedyn i gario ymlaen gyda 1 neu 2 o'r pynciau yna. So fi'n yn gwybod ar hyn o bryd, ond mae fe'n rhoi cyfle wedyn i fi drio popeth allan a gweld pa un wedyn fi eisiau cymryd ymhellach. Do'n i ddim yn siŵr iawn pa bwnc o'n i moyn astudio yn y brifysgol. O'n i'n gwybod o'n i'n licio hanes a gwleidyddiaeth a jyst uniaethau yn gyffredinol, ond wedyn pan oedd yn dod lawr i ddewis un pwnc i arbenigo mewn, do'n i really ddim yn siŵr. Felly mae'r cwrs yma jyst i roi cyfle mor dda i fi allu jyst trio allan lot o bynciau newydd fi erioed wedi astudio blaen, a wedyn dod i benderfyniad bach yn hwyrach. O ran y cwrs ei hun, mae gyda fi 8 awr o ddarlithoedd yr wythnos. Sy'n meddwl fel arfer mae gyda fi rhyw 1 neu 2 bob dydd yn ystod yr wythnos. A wedyn mae gyda fi wedyn supervisions yn dibynnu ar sawl traethawd fi'n neud yr wythnos. Felly mae'r tymhorau yma'n 8 wythnos o hyd, a wedyn mae disgwyl i fi wneud 12 traethawd, so 3 bob pwnc bob tymor. So mae hwnna'n gweithio mas wedyn. Mae'r rhai wythnosau yn ffodus yn gallu bod lot fwy prysur na'i gilydd, so weithiau mae fe'n golygu dim ond rhyw 1 traethawd sydd 'da fi, ond weithiau ar y degau mae fe'n gallu bod yn rhyw 4 yr wythnos. A wedyn bod gyda fi supervisions wedyn, lle dyn ni'n cwrdd gyda un o'r tutoried i drafod y traethawd, a fel arfer mae un person arall wedyn yn rhan o hynny, trafod y traethawd, y syniadau, weithiau mynd bach ymhellach, siarad yn bunig i dysgu am yn y darlithoedd hefyd. Felly mae fe'n gyfle da jyst i dynnu popeth ei gilydd a wneud synwyr o'r pwnc, a gallu jyst cael echerio chydig gan rhywun sy'n arbenigwr yn y pwnc, a fi jyst yn meddwl bod mae'n ffordd rili dda ddysgu. Mae diwrnod arferol i fi yng Nghaergrawnt ar hyn o bryd yn dechrau gyda fi'n codi, falle wneud chydig o waith, wedyn mae fel arfer darlithoedd 'da fi'n y bore, felly dyn ni'n cerdded draw, mae rhai fi'n lwcus i gyd yn rhai byw lle mae'n rhai pobl ar-lein ar hyn o bryd, ond fi'n gallu cerdded i fel a mae tua 100 ohonon ni, 150 yn ni fel arfer, yn gwylio darlithoedd yma, sy'n jyst yn rhoi rhyw gyflwyniad fel arfer i'r pwnc, a wedyn mae fel arfer traethawd gyda fi wedyn sy'n cysylltu i'r darlith. Fi'n cael rhestr ddarllen o lyfrau a erthyglau sy'n ymwneud â'r pwnc, felly fyna wedyn mae'r gwaith caled yn dechrau, lle mae'r ddarlith dim ond yn rhoi rhyw gyflwyniad byr, really, i'r pwnc. A wedyn mae fel an I fi wedyn i fynd I ddarllen I wneud synwyr o'r peth a dysgu mwy am y pwnc. Wedyn fi'n trio anelu ddarllen am rhyw cwpl o ddyddiau a wedyn fi'n mynd mlaen I actually sgwennu'r traethawd. A maen nhw'n 2,000 eiriau o hyd a maen nhw'n cymryd cwpl o ddyddiau I sgwennu o leia. Fi'n trio gweithio mewn amrywiaeth o lefydd, weithiau dyn ni'n mynd I weithio mewn caffi, weithiau fi jyst yma yn fy stafell, neu mae yna lyfrgell gyda ni fan hyn yn y coleg, sy'n neis achos bod y mor agos I fy stafell I, neu wedyn mae tipyn o lyfrgell lloyd jyst o gwmpas Caergrawnt ei hun, rhai sy'n cysylltu gyda'r pwnc, mae yna lyfrgell hanes, mae yna lyfrgell gwleidyddiaeth, so fi'n gallu mynd yna I holl y llyfrau sy'n angen arna I. O ran wedyn ar ôl y brifysgol, fi ddim yn siŵr iawn fy hun eto pa fath o yrfa sy'n ni'n licio wneud, ond mae pobl yn mynd ymlaen I wneud y gyfraith, maen nhw'n wneud newyddiaduraeth, mynd I weithio I fyd gwleidyddiaeth lot o bobl, I bethau fel y gwasanaeth sifil neu y swyddfa dramor. Mae jyst gymaint o ystod eang o bethau ydych chi'n gallu wneud gyda'r astudio Gwyddorau Cymdeithasol. Mae sgwennu traethodau a Mae herio chi feddwl a I ddadle a fi'n meddwl mae'r sgiliau yn rhai mor bwysig I, a maen nhw'n gallu bod yn berthnasol I unrhyw yrfa, really. Sy'n ni'n gweud fi'n mwynhau mwy am y cwrs di, mae fe mor eang be fi'n gallu astudio. Mae'r cyfuniad o wneud pethau mwy clasurol a astudio'r clasuron gwleidyddiaeth a fath o athroniaeth, ond hefyd ar yr un pryd mae cyfle dyn ni astudio materion lot mwy cyfoes a wedyn dysgu o'r ddau beth a fi'n hoffi pa mor hyblyg yw'r cwrs, mae cyfle dyn ni fenthyg o gymaint o bynciau gwahanol, dyn ni'n gallu benthyg o feisydd hanes, o economeg, o'r gyfraith, o athroniaeth, fath o be bynnag. Mae jyst gymaint o gyfleoedd I fynd rhwng pynciau. So sy'n ni'n annog, os ydych chi'n mynd siŵr am beth ydych chi'n moyn wneud I fynd am rhywbeth reit draws byncio fel na, achos mae fe'n golygu ydych chi'n gallu cael y gorau o ddau fyd a wneud y mwy ar gwahanol bynciau sy'n gael.